Linnea is coming out in version 6.5 or Luna 6, and she's bringing quite the upgrade to our Lunar-Crystallize teams. Her kit is focused on damage, res shred, and healing, all of which is very universal utility. However, we're not just gonna cover Linnea in this video. In fact, this isn't even a Linnea-focused video. After writing the script out, it turned more into an Illuga video. So if you're just here for Linnea content, fair warning, you're only getting like 2 to 3 minutes of that. But this is something I wanted to talk about since Illuga first came out, so let's talk about it. As always, additional info is down below, and captions are available if you need them. With that out of the way, let's get started. I'll start off with a brief summary on Linnea's kit. For her skill, if you tap it once, she'll summon Lumi, and it'll start doing damage. It'll be instances of regular geo damage, but if you have moondrifts nearby, which is the Lunar-Crystallize constructs, Lumi will occasionally deal instances of direct Lunar-Crystallize damage. There's an alternate version of this ability. If you repeatedly tap her skill, she'll feed Hungry Lumi, and it'll... Wait a minute, that's actually Hungry Luma! Repeatedly tapping the skill feeds Hungry Luma, and it'll deal a single massive instance of Lunar-Crystallize damage. Afterwards, Hungry Luma turns back into its regular form, where it only deals regular geo damage. Linnea's A1 provides 15% geo res shred to nearby enemies, and in Ascendant Gleam, this is doubled for a total of 30% res shred, an overall pretty nice effect for all geo teams. It also stacks with Geo Resonance, which would provide a total of 50% geo res shred. For her A4, she provides an EM bonus to a party member based on her defense. If the active character is a moon sign character, they will get the EM bonus. If the active character is not a moon sign character, Linnea will get the EM bonus. This passive is just a nice way to allocate EM to the right unit, since most non-moon sign characters would care less for EM stats. Finally, her burst is the most complicated ability of all. She heals. I'd say Linnea's like a mixture of Inefa and Shilonen. She provides strong personal damage and an EM bonus, similar to Inefa. Then she has the healing and res shred that Shilonen provides. While she's still reliant on Lunar-Crystallize being present, all of her utility is universal, which makes her really strong as a general support. I wanted to cover Linnea's kit and how good it is, because it kinda relates to an issue I have regarding another Geo character. Why did they do Illuga so dirty? Illuga is a character who pretends to be a general geo buffer, but in reality is more of a Zibai buffer. His burst provides the active character an additive base damage bonus to their geo hits, similar to Shenhe's Icy Quills. If they deal an instance of damage that's considered Lunar-Crystallize damage, that bonus is around 6.7 times higher. The ability only buffs geo damage when it comes from a character's normal, charge, plunging attack, skill, or burst, which means you can't buff regular Lunar-Crystallize damage from the Moondrifts. You can only buff direct Lunar-Crystallize damage. Second, as I mentioned earlier, it's only the active character, so you can't even buff the direct damage coming from Columbina's skill. Technically, this issue was already prevalent when these 3 units first came out in 6.3, but now we have a second character who can dish out off-field Lunar-Crystallize damage, who also can't get buffed. You can technically make this work if you use Linnea's repeated tap skill, since she'd be on field for that, but that's only for one instance of damage. In summary, his geo buffing is much worse than the lunar buffing, it's only direct lunar damage, and it can't buff off-field characters. These limitations on his burst are what make him a Zibai support. I thought that maybe Illuga had such a weird kit because Linnea would serve as a more specific Lunar-Crystallize buffer, but now that her kit is out, I'm just confused. Yes, Linnea works best in Lunar-Crystallize teams, but her utility is still universal. So why couldn't they give Illuga more room to play as an open-ended Lunar-Crystallize buffer? Why didn't they make him work with Columbina, Linnea, and the Moondrifts? I actually might know why he doesn't work with the Moondrifts specifically. It has to do with the way lunar reaction damage is calculated in the first place. Yeah, that's right, I went down the math rabbit hole again. While there's variations to the reaction formula, all reaction damage falls into the same basic equation. Base damage times the EM and damage percent bonus, plus any additive multiplier. Then it's followed by crit and elemental resistance. When it comes to regular lunar damage, each character will calculate their own set of damage using this formula. Then all the damage is pooled and it's adjusted based on who contributed the most to least amount of damage. The second highest contributor divides their damage by 2, and the third and fourth divided by 12. If Illuga were to buff the Moondrift's Lunar-Crystallize damage with the current formula, it would have clashed significantly with his kit. His buff is an additive bonus, which means it would apply before the damage pooling occurs. When Moondrifts dealt damage, this pooling would result in multiple stacks being consumed at once. A full Lunar-Crystallize team could consume 4 stacks with a single Moondrift hit, but these things deal 3 hits at a time, so a single instance would eat away at 12 stacks all at once. On top of that, the lower contributors of the reaction have their damage cut. Not only would Illuga's bonus be consumed much faster, the effectiveness of his burst would be much weaker. There is an easy fix to this. Simply take Illuga's bonus from this middle section, and instead add it at the end after the pooling occurs. This would allow a Moondrift Harmony to only consume 3 stacks at a time. It's still multiple stacks at once, but 3 is much, much less than 12. It would result in an issue of consistency, however. Unlike other units who provide additive reaction buffs, like Mizuki's C1 or Laoma's Burst, Illuga's Burst would apply differently, resulting in what is essentially a new formula. On top of that, having his bonus apply at the end means it can't be boosted by crit, which reduces the effectiveness of his burst. I have a feeling the devs wanted to preserve consistency, which is why Illuga's kit came out the way it did. I'm not saying I agree with the decision, because it resulted in the most niche support I've ever seen, but it's probably what happened. I also think this whole thing with the damage formula is why Lunar Bloom came out the way it did. Laoma is capable of buffing Bloom, Burgeon, Hyper Bloom, and Lunar Bloom damage, but all of these are independently owned. I already talked about how creating a regular form of Lunar Bloom damage could possibly interfere with certain Bloom units like Nilou, but now I'm thinking a secondary reason would be because a regular form of Lunar Bloom damage would interfere with Laoma's kit. Characters contributing to a grouped damage type would eat multiple stacks at once. This same logic would apply to Lunar Charged as well. Because of how the reaction formula works, we will likely never see a character who buffs regular Lunar Charged damage with an additive bonus. Okay, so I explained the issue of Illuga's kit, but also why it might have had to be designed this way. But once again, I'm not in support of their decision. I still think they could have made something more interesting. So, if I were in charge of making Illuga more of a Lunar-Crystallize support instead of a Zibai support, what would I do? I tried coming up with a quick little fix that still preserved consistency with his kit, which meant an idea that wouldn't result in changing up the formulas for his damage buff. For my idea, I'll be giving him a Duran-style ability, where tapping or holding his skill results in different burst effects. If you tap it, he keeps his original design where he only buffs the active character's Geo and Lunar-Crystallize damage. This works better for a Zibai hypercarry team, or a generic Geo DPS focused team if you don't have the reaction enabled. But for the hold method, Illuga won't buff regular Geo damage at all. Instead, all stacks will be allocated towards Lunar-Crystallize. If a character deals direct Lunar-Crystallize damage, Illuga applies the same additive bonus as before, but this time it can now work on off-fielders like Columbina and Linnea. Alternatively, when a character triggers Lunar-Crystallize, Illuga will consume a stack and charge an additional Moondrift. In other words, triggering the reaction charges 2 Moondrifts instead of 1, effectively doubling the rate at which they can fire their shots. And as an added bonus, overflow is allowed. So if you have 2 Moondrifts charged already, triggering the reaction will charge a third one, and Illuga's stack will charge the next first one after the Harmony hit. With this idea, Illuga would be able to buff all forms of Lunar-Crystallize, but in different ways. Direct damage gets a direct damage increase, as it currently is, and then Moondrifts don't have a damage increase because of the stack issue I mentioned earlier, but they would still get a DPS increase because of the frequency of attacks getting boosted. The holding method would also make Illuga a better group buffer in teams with multiple Lunar-Crystallize DPSs. It also gives players a chance to experiment with Illuga in Moondrift teams. Yes, a Lunar-Crystallize unit still has to be present to enable the reaction, but since their personal hits of lunar damage aren't as frequent, Illuga allocates more stacks towards the Moondrift buff. I like niche supports who work best in a specific archetype, but I don't like it when a character is specifically a one-unit buffer. Linnea's release is going to be a great addition to Lunar-Crystallize teams, but her release shone more of a spotlight on the issues Illuga had. If Linnea's utility is all universal, Illuga could have been a Lunar-Crystallize archetype buffer, and he wouldn't have been stepping on her toes. In fact, this direction would have made him work better with Linnea. Maybe I'm just biased because I'm down bad for that slightly exposed shoulder, but I really think he should have had a better kit. But what do you guys think? How do you feel about Illuga's design, and what changes would you give him if given the chance? Also, feel free to share in the comments what your thoughts are on Linnea's kit, whether you're pulling for her, and what kind of teams you want to try her out in. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!